There are a whole range of challenges, some of them catch-22 type paradoxes, that accompany the next phase of surviving domestic violence. And those catch-22s include safety and protection. Even though a partner or partners may have been violent in the past, and children may have felt like they were walking on eggshells when they got home from school, they knew that when anything went down outside a home, they had a parent at home who was like a little firecracker. And strangely enough, even though children are unprotected in the sense of feeling unsafe with a parent of that nature at home, the catch-22 is that outside of home they can feel very safe because they've got that thinking on board. I'll get my dad onto you, I'll get my mum onto you, I'll get both my mums and dads onto you. And so, strangely enough, the catch-22 with having violence in the household is that once the violence has stopped and the party acting out the violence has been withdrawn or moved away from, children can feel very unsafe. One, because of the familiarity, of course, and two, because the ace card they had up their sleeve or in their back pocket is now gone. And so there's a huge sense of unsafety around who's going to protect us in the event where threats come from outside the house. They may have been familiar with threats from inside the house, however now they've got to deal with that sense of threats that come from outside. And that can include schoolyard bullying. It can include a sense of, for young people, peer pressure around involvement, whether it be in terms of alcohol and drugs, whether it be in terms of associating with periphery type activity, including young people who are trying to prove themselves, whether it be patching up with a gang, whether it be hanging out with associates, whether it be doing some things which are borderline in terms of antisocial activity. The whole sense of proving themselves, because the rituals associated with rites of passage at home to do with maturity and responsibility within the family system have now become deconstructed very quickly, and because the person or people who would otherwise there, who had taken that young person through that process, is no longer there. Now that may include mowing the lawn, it might include digging a garden, it might include knowing how to plant food, it might be knowing how to harvest food, it might be putting the washing out of the line, it might be stripping down an engine and putting it back together again, it might be clipping bonsai trees, it might be putting plants and flowers up in a high-rise apartment, it might be getting little ones to school, walking down stairs or going down elevators in multi-storied tenement blocks. Anything of that nature, where there are added responsibilities that are accrued as a result of birth order, as a result of age, as a result of having younger siblings or family members that have in essence been inherited around the whole issue of looking after and taking further responsibilities in the context of the family system. And so what's presented is a whole bunch of catch-22s around feeling unsafe in a different way, around the sense of whilst there might have been times or lulls in the middle of family violence or domestic violence, there were helpful discussions around how to deal with young ones at school, how to deal with their peers, discussions within the family system around a whole range of issues. We now, particularly where the person who has left or been moved away from was an initiator, those types of issues don't get discussed, or they don't get discussed in the same way, and there's different input. And so it's really important to speak openly with our children and having a sense of being able to identify openly what each person in the household's positive qualities are, and ways in how we're going to commit to support those positive qualities, both in terms of language and how you and I speak to each other, in terms of values within the household, and within that, in terms of practices within the household. What can I do to help you to make things easier or better for you in terms of improving your quality of life? What can we do to help Ashley? What can we do to help John? What can we do to help Brooke? What can we all do to help Ariana? Ariana, what would you like? How can we support you to do that better? How can we support you to free you up to do those other things that you're needing to do? What do you want from each of us? What do you need? And so those things may sound like everyday, quite usual conversations. However, they're not usual conversations in the context that open communication has been stifled and shut down by controlling parties in the house who have not only undermined the communication, they've undermined collaboration in the sense of doing things together, and they've undermined cooperation in terms of helping each other out to achieve whatever those things we were doing together are or were. And so at this point, it's really, really crucial to recognise that the ratio in the house has changed, and potentially for a long time. And so that means that there's going to be more communication around who walks little ones to school and who goes to pick them up. More communication around having teenagers go out to social events and who's going to pick them up. More communication around devices. So these young people in the house have a mobile phone or a means to contact, that those means to contact are used and they're adhered to, they're stuck to. Because the need for accountability now increases, because the ratios, the number of adults to children has decreased. And so everyone's got to pick up the slack. Everyone's got to pick up a little bit more. And particularly too for the parent who's left at home or parents who are left at home, the issue of that close communication. So that there's an ethic, a practice in the household whereby when young people go out, they know they've got enough money to get home by other means, to perhaps get something to eat before they come home, or to share a taxi or whatever form of transport it is that they're taking, but that they've got backups. They've got backups. And that when that discussion around communication is had, that it's reinforced, that timeframes are stuck to, that agreements are stuck to, and that there's no change to those agreements or timeframes unless they're negotiated and discussed before going out the door. Because there's no backup in relation to following up where those agreements are not held to. And so that can, of course, induce a certain amount of anxiety and a certain amount of concern, because the other party who would normally be there to stay at home with little ones is now not there. And so the need for open, honest, upfront communication has now increased. Now, your communication may have been upfront and honest in the past. However, the fear induced through the use of violence or witnessing violence and receiving those impacts can quickly undermine honest communication, because the party who's using the violence may find or may perceive, interpret, that your honesty back to them is too confrontational, in the sense that their role or position is being challenged. And so the need to harbour and to foster and to encourage open communication with each other is absolutely paramount. It's at the top of the mountain. The other issue within that too, of course, is that there are boundaries in relation to rule breaking. Some of the biggest rules in the world get broken through the expression of violence in a personal household. And that is that the person who would otherwise qualify themselves as being the protector in the house, standing at the front of the house and being asked the question, "What are you doing out here?" "Oh, I'm here to protect my family." "Oh, okay. What are you doing out here?" "I'm making sure no threats come into the house." "Oh, okay. What are you doing out here?" "I'm making sure that no harm comes through my partner and our children. And so, of course, the paradox or catch-22 within that is the same person who's purported or put their hand up to be the protector of everyone in the house is in fact made themselves unemployed, because now they're doing the damage. Now they're harming the occupants of the house. Now they're undermining any securities that were in place themselves. And so the finger's pointed outside of the house, the finger pointed out has 3 or 4 fingers on the other hand pointing back. And that's a really difficult, despairing place to be in. Scary place to be in, despairing place to be in. And regardless where partners left behind have a sense of the person doing the violence was skiving off or doing this or doing that, or not owning their portion, doing the part to them and taking responsibility, the ratios issue hones in the factor that regardless of the fact they may not have been doing their portion or little of their portion, the ratios feature still changes things radically. Because even when there's another adult at home and they're not doing their share, they're at home, which means that little ones can be left to be supervised by them at home. Without them being there at all, that's not an option anymore. Or it's certainly a compromised option, depending on the age of the little ones and whether or not they can look after themselves or not. Whether they're teens and they're able to look after themselves and it's legal to leave them at home and they know how to be left at home and they can look after things, not so much an issue. However, where they're not teens and they're still highly dependent, big issue. So the whole factor of how things are organised and arranged takes a big 180 in terms of 180 degree turn, and the communication in the house has not only got to increase after the violence, it's got to increase in terms of going into the future, so that those grey areas of vulnerability are addressed and closed through working together more cooperatively, giving each other a hand, being able to state what needs are around types of support from each other, and being able to normalise a conversation whereby those needs and requests can be made from each other and met as quickly and as expediently as possible. And so within this process there's a goal to renorm how you and I communicate with each other, with our family system in this new context. The other factor which quickly or not so quickly becomes an issue is when other adults come to visit at home, because it may have been some time due to friends and family members being cut off that there've been not many visitors to the house, and so that becomes an issue too in terms of how safe children are with different visitors coming to the house, how that's interpreted, that there's a real need to console little ones, particularly immediately after separation, in an ongoing sense, that whomever comes into the house is safe too,